Hello and good evening to everyone, and thank you very much indeed for joining the Nottingham Forest Supporters Trust AGM. This is the first AGM we've had for 2 years, and as I'm sure everybody watching will be aware, the reason for that has been COVID. Societies like ourselves were given dispensation by the FCA, so this is the first for 2 years. What you're going to hear from us in the next 45 minutes, we'll summarise some of the information, some useful information about the Trust, things that we've been doing in the last 12 months. We'll touch upon a few things from before that as well. My colleagues on the Trust board will be speaking after me. We'll have one formal motion where we need to approve the accounts. That will require a vote from all you attending. And then after 45 minutes, we're delighted to be joined by Graham Moran from the Community Trust, the Nottingham Forest Community Trust. And he'll be telling you about some of the great work he's been doing. And the two trusts have been working together more closely recently. Beyond that, then, we're very pleased to have a senior member of the Football Supporters Association, Dave Rose, who's the Deputy CEO of that organisation. He's with us. So Dave, thank you very much indeed for attending. And Dave, we hope we'll be able to say a few minutes towards the end of the meeting. So the apologies, we have one from a board member who's Barry Frenchman, and he apologises he can't be here. He had a previous engagement, and so he sends his apologies. So moving on then to a few things I'd like to talk to you about. First thing we want to talk about is, or I want to talk about is engagement, and that means engagement with the football club, because that's what we're about. Owners of football clubs are transient, of course. We have Mr. Marinakis at the moment, with Mr. Kominakis supporting him, of course. And before that, we had Fowers, and before that, we had Nigel Doughty. But they change, don't they? They move on. Players move on, managers move on. Let's hope the current manager doesn't move on anytime soon, but it will happen at some point. One thing that's permanent is fans, and organisations like ourselves are about engagement with football clubs and giving you people watching this, the members of our organisation and the fans more widely, it's about giving you guys a voice with the club. And so that is the fundamental thing that we as an organisation want to talk to you about tonight. What have we been doing with regard to that engagement with our football club? I'll be honest with you, some of tonight we are going to talk about our achievements and be proud of them and talk about them positively, but we are also open to criticism from time to time, and we'll touch upon areas where we think we could have done things better. But the relationship with the club isn't one of them. We believe we have an enviable relationship with our club. And the reason we have that is because of you, our membership. The club wouldn't listen to us if we didn't have many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of members who engage with us, who talk to us, who tell us what you want us to bring up with the club. The relationship with the club isn't about what the people, myself and the other people you'll see on here think and feel about the club. It's about how we represent the views of the membership. And it's because of that and because of the fantastic engagement we get from you that we'll listen to, and we have the relationship we have. We believe in dialogue. We don't believe in holding the club to account, which has been a phrase that has been used in criticism of us, saying we should be doing more of that. We don't think we should. We don't have that sort of authority, but we do believe in posing difficult questions to the club, respectfully, right tone of voice, but we don't have regulatory power over Nottingham Forest. We promote dialogue with them, and because of that, they listen to us, and we have a great deal of influence over what the club does and how it behaves. We had effect on things like ticket pricing during COVID, that sort of thing. We've had a lot of positive reactions from the club, and they regularly speak to us. The formal memorandum of understanding, the MOU that we have in place is, we're a relatively young trust. We're about 5 years old now, and within a few months of the current ownership taking over, we had an MOU in place, and that was only the second MOU of any football trust in the country. And it, I think, underlines the excellent relationship we have. Some of you will have watched the Q&A that we held with the club in, I believe it was March last year. that was unique. No other trust has done an MOU in that sort of extensive MOU. And the questions, which, as some of you might have recognised, I put to the club on that day, came from you. They came from our members. That's where the questions came from. They weren't mine, they were yours. And as I say, that's why we exist. So we've established mutual trust and we've established mutual respect. We have regular formal meetings and we have extremely regular informal contact with the club, sometimes as often as weekly. And so we think that we have represented you well with regard to that relationship. I'd like to move on now to our engagement with fan organisations. So you see Dave Rose, or you'll see him a little later from the FSA. We have regular contact with them. The Football Supporters Association is effectively our umbrella body. And by talking through them, they give us a voice on things like the fan-led review, governmental interaction, the rights and interests of football supporters on the national stage. Dave may tell you a little bit more about the organisation and what they do a little later. We've also this year had regular contact with organisations such as Level Playing Field in the area of disability rights and accommodations for disabled fans, and also Fair Game, who are very closely involved with the fan-led review. Moving on from that, I'd like to talk about governance. After me, you're going to hear from Bob Wetton, who's our new secretary. He replaced the old secretary, who was rubbish. That secretary was me. And I didn't do a particularly good job, I'll be honest with you, about having a correct constitution in place. We had a constitution, but Bob, who has wonderful experience in this sort of area, has come in and has revolutionised and upgraded our policies, our constitution. He'll tell you a little bit more about this when he comes on. Importantly as well, we've also significantly improved the database that we have. I'll talk to you towards the end of what I'm going to be speaking about in a minute as to why that's so important. Wider than that, we have regular communications. Part of our role as the trust is to be a spokesperson for our spokespeople for the fans. And so the way in which we do that, we speak to you, of course, mainly through email communications, which only come to you, but more widely, we also communicate via social media, and our presence in those three big areas of Twitter, Instagram and Facebook has increased substantially this year. We have quite substantial reach now. Sometimes when we put messages out, they're read by many tens of thousands of people. We communicate obviously through our website as well, and behind the scenes on our website, we've improved that substantially and it's integrated nicely with our database now. We also enter into individual correspondence with some of you. I don't know whether there's anybody listening tonight or watching and listening tonight who I've spoken to directly, but I've certainly engaged with lots of fans face-to-face on a few occasions in the last 12 months, a few also on Zoom calls and telephone calls, and I'm always open to do that. So we've done a fair bit of it. And we also do some broadcast media from time to time. I did some at the weekend because of the Derby game when people wanted to know the interests of Nottingham Forest supporters. I'm always careful when we speak that what we say or what I say doesn't represent all fans, but because of the fact that we are an established voice for Nottingham Forest fans and have a close relationship with the club, we often get asked. I've got a couple more things to talk to you about. Firstly, it's the membership, so you guys, and in total numbers, we have seen a decline in our membership. I said earlier I would talk about areas where we could have done things better. We have three reasons we believe the membership has declined. The first one is our fault, and that is that the database that we had was not really fit for purpose. We weren't aware of it. Of course, we're not all tech wizards here, but we've identified the fact that the database wasn't sending out prompts to people to say, your renewal is coming up. And for that reason, quite a few people dropped off membership without meaning to, because they weren't receiving prompts. So we've addressed that, fixed it. My apologies for it happening. As I say, it's going to be fine from now on. Two other factors, though, which were similarly important, perhaps more so. COVID precipitated substantial disengagement from football, as you'll all be aware, and people therefore didn't renew for that reason. And perhaps the most important thing is the club isn't in crisis. it tends to be the case that organisations like ours get a huge amount of membership and engagement when you're in crisis. Bodies like Supporters Trust can sometimes, in our view, mistakenly be seen as protest organisations, or at least vehicles for protest. We don't believe in that, but nevertheless, when we launched, the club was facing a potential existential threat towards the end of the Fawaz al-Hawsawi regime, and for that reason, it took off, and we had many hundreds of members in a very short time. And so those are the factors. The membership has declined. The final thing I want to talk to you about is our priorities for the next 12 months. Well, perhaps the first thing to say here is that it will be dictated by you, by our members. You tell us what our priorities are. We might recommend respectfully to you what we think they could and should be, but we will listen to you carefully as to what they should be. So segueing from that point about declining membership, one of our main factors this year will be enhancing membership benefits for those of you who are currently members. So you will see some ideas and thoughts from us as to how you will get more from your membership beyond the opportunity to influence your club's behaviour, but we'll be looking at some things we can do there. So that'll be enhancing membership for those who are currently members, but also growing membership. Two other things. We believe the fan-led review is a once in a generation, at least, and maybe more than that, chance to influence football for all fans at all levels of the game. And we strongly believe in this. We know for a fact that they are very receptive. I had an email from Nick Randall about a week ago asking for us to go in and talk to them about the fan-led review. So we'll be doing that shortly, obviously after the transfer window. And then finally, we will, of course, be talking to them about the Peter Taylor stand as and when that gets approved, and we'll be having some influence, we hope, on some of the finer details for that. So with no further ado, that's enough from me. I'm going to pass you over now to my colleague, Bob Wetton, who's the Secretary of the Trust. Thank you for listening.
I'm quite a new person to the board. I've been a member of the Trust for most of its life. This report will cover 2 years, but I've only been with the Trust on the board since January. I was co-opted in January a year ago, and then asked to take on the role of Secretary in May. And what I tried to do first of all was undertake an audit of where we were, bearing in mind that, like many organisations, we suffered from the impact of COVID on our activities. And the issues that I addressed initially were around the board, and I'm pleased to say that we do have a good board and we are well led by our chair. I'd like to formally thank board members, first of all, for welcoming me onto the board, and also as well, as we've tried to address issues, I want to thank them for their willingness to accept change in the way that we do things. That will be a continuing process, but it's really pleasing that we stand together in terms of wanting to improve. Of course, we did lose some very experienced members, some who were in the right from the start. And I mean, in terms of members, by being board members. That has created a lack of capacity, and over the coming year, we really need to address that. One thing that was clear was that, particularly after COVID, we needed to improve our support to our members. And you will get more on this later, but I want to pay tribute to the work in particular, not solely, but in particular to Paul Seven for his work around the back office systems to enable that. And much of what you see on our website has got a lot of input from Paul, so I'd like to particularly thank him for that. And you've heard from the chairman that we've been upgrading IT systems. As we've gone along, we've tried to take a view that says we need to ensure that we've got a much better, robust system. So we've not just tried to fix as we've gone, we've actually tried to make sure that we've got a system that's going to help us over the coming years. The Trust has always undertaken community projects, but we are looking to continue what we do, but also improve both the number and the range of those projects. And again, you'll hear a little more of that later, but it is a prerequisite as a supporters trust that we do these things. We have got one or two issues that are work in progress that we need to just get signed off, and some of those you'll be doing today. One issue that we've got is trying to recruit to the board. Following my appointment, we have secured another board member. At the same time, we've recruited and lost one. You'll hear later that whilst we'd hope that we might get interest for people to stand for election to the board, that's been less than successful. So we've got to do more to achieve that over the coming 12-24 months. We do need a fit for purpose constitution, and we've taken the lead from the FSA. They've updated their model constitution from a 2016 model to a 2021 model. So we will be doing that. And as you heard from Andy, we want to include the women's team in that. So that's quite a step forward. And you've heard about our MOU, which again, we want to include the women's team in that. So what are our priorities? Well, we've already tried to improve our service to members. I think the evidence there, if you look on the website, there's a lot more information. Andy's touched on the links with the football club, and I've been really impressed by the relationship with the football club. It's very professional, it's very respectful, and it ties in with what Trust should be doing. It's very much about off-field activities, not on-field activities. One of the other priorities, as a trust, we've had a lot of support from the FSA, but since I was appointed as secretary, again, I want to pay tribute here to the incredible support that we had from the Championship Network manager, Debs Dilworth. Debs has now moved across to look after the women's game, but her support, and this is a message for Dave as well, we want to recognise the support from the FSA, and particularly that network manager. It's as impressive as I've come across in a long career in my working life. We also, as well with the FSA, have an active input, but I'll say a little bit more about that later. The new constitution, we did post a link when you were invited along to the AGM. Anyone who's looked at all 130 odd paragraphs won't see an awful lot of change from the original draft, but it is about making sure that we are fit for purpose. The next thing that we have got as a priority is to agree a strategy, and it's important that we're clear to ourselves and particularly to our members about what we propose to do, how we're going to move forward. And we've agreed that a board meeting over the next 3 or 4 months will be solely dedicated to what we want to do. We'll be parking normal business and really trying to take a medium and a longer term view about what we're here to do. So let's have a look at the emerging issues. And apologies if I repeat a little of what I've said earlier, but it's a prerequisite that work in the community has to be part of our trust. We want to do it anyway, but the new model is that it's a prerequisite. So yes, we've done very well on things like the My City, My Shirt, food collections, etc. But at the moment, we are looking to support the women's team and also the Afghan women's team that are over in the UK. And we need to do more of that. Most of it will be local, but occasionally there will be a wider focus. We recognise as well that the FSA are giving increased profile to the women's game, both at a national and a local level. And we've been fortunate that one of our board members, Barry Frenchman, has been an active member of that network. But there will be more to do on that. And again, we'll be keeping you in touch on that. One thing that we've tried to do more actively over recent months is build that relationship with the FSA. They are our key body. So we are participating in a number of networks, and currently we're also serving on 3 subcommittees, one of which we've been as a trust at the forefront of setting up. That's to do with midweek match distances, but there are other ones around fan behaviour and another one about FA Cup rewards in the women's game, and we will be inputting to those. Our idea is that, yes, we want to work with FSA, but also as well, we want to be a policy influencer with them as well. So we take that role very seriously. On now to what I think is a tipping point for football, which is the fan-led review. The FSA have done a great job on this. We've got the politicians with us. We did post about 3 months ago an analysis of the report that came out. That's the starting point for legislation. And I do urge colleagues, members to read that, because I will be asking for an action from you all on that. But the key issues are about fairer funding, trying to get it streamed out, not just at the Premier League level, but throughout the rest of professional football. We do support external regulation. We know that this will be contentious, but we are very supportive of it. If you look at the analysis that we did, there are too many methods of regulation that don't really work with each other, as between, say, for instance, the Premier League and the EFL. Also in the fan-led review features very much the role of supporters and issues around the golden share, and a lot of the history of clubs that shouldn't be changed without supporter engagement. Locally, we are now embarking on trying to build relationships with other supporter groups. We all come at it from differing angles, and we've got different structures, but ideally every club needs to make sure that there is an assembly of supporters. So we're trying to move that one forward. The timescale for the fan-led review is that it will be introduced in the Queen's speech, which provisionally is, I think it's the 11th of May 22. There are a lot of things happening in Parliament at the moment, so timescales may change. The view from the Minister was that it could take 6 to 9 months. I think that may be optimistic. But if we have 9 months to May, does that mean it could operate from season 23-4? That's a question, not a prediction. But obviously we'll be monitoring what's happening there. And I did say that I want to ask for your support. We want people, supporters, our trust members, to write to their MPs to ask them to support. We've already posted our analysis on our website. What you will then need to do is to obtain details of where you can contact your own MP. It is available, very easily available on the website. We as a trust will be writing, and we urge all our members to do likewise. Just one very final thing from me. Andy stressed relationships. I want to underline that. First of all, our internal relationship with our members. We need to relate better to you, and we need a two-way process there. We have the mechanisms now, the technology is better, and we will be engaging more regularly, more actively with you, and giving you more information. Externally, of course, our key relationships are with our football club, with our football club's community trust, with whom we've already got good relationships, with the FSA and with supporter groups. That concludes my report.
Bob, I think it's back to you now, isn't it, for the board election update?
Yes, thank you, Andy. In accordance with good practice, we had an external facilitator, Neil Lemilliere, who has been associated with Exeter City Trust, which I think was one of the very first trusts 19 years ago, so very, very experienced. So he's conducted that on our behalf. We had disappointingly, only 4 candidates. That's Andy Cadell, Barry Frenchman, Lindsay Knott, and Paul Seven. You will all be pleased that I'm not going to go through the revised constitution in detail. It was put out in the letter of invitation to the AGM, and we've got a click-on facility there. We've got the old constitution that's been on our website for quite a while. That will stay as our constitution until we get a successful application to the FCA to amend the constitution. There are no major changes. It's to make it more up to date and a better fit with the guidance from FSA. And of course, we want to add as well the women's team to the constitution.
Okay.
So we're asking for approval. It is for the AGM to approve this constitution.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Could I just say on there as well, Andy, that what follows from that is that we should also be refreshing our 8 policies. These are policy documents that are in the FSA guidance. We do, in the main, have all those policies, but again, it's a board decision to again update those in line with current guidance.
Can I ask Paul Seven to talk about community issues and member services update? Paul.
Hi there. So as Bob mentioned, one of the things that we're now obliged to do as a community benefit society is outlined in the new constitution, and that is that we promote responsible community engagement and encourage the club to do the same. What we didn't want to do is reinvent the wheel on this, because we've got a very successful community trust in place, and you'll hear more about that later from Graham Moran, who's our guest tonight. But lockdown was a time when there was no football, of course, and we weren't going to games, and in some cases there were no matches taking place. So, but it was also a time that people needed help as well, and so that it became an obvious focus for us at this time to look at the local community in ways we could help people who were suffering over the period of the pandemic. One of the obvious areas was, of course, mental health, and we worked with a community trust on this to promote mental health awareness. We met with the lead for Tricky to Talk, which is an established campaign and program that's run by the community trust, and together with Claire we created various pieces of video content which went out on both trusts channels. You might have seen some of them on social media, and we also ran a mental health awareness course as well, led by Claire, and that was made available to members. That was really good, and yeah, really enjoyed that, and we had several attendees for that Zoom session. Moving on to food bank collection. So obviously you may have seen it at recent matches at the City Ground. I think it's Blackpool and Hull. There was food bank collections, and they were done by Hope, which is a local charity which supplies 15 Nottingham food banks. And we've played a big role in this. We have utilised the relationship with the club that that Andy has talked about to get a partnership between us all in place so that these food banks can collect ahead of games. And there's been 2 this season, as I said, but also a Christmas box collection whilst there were no fans at games. So quite a lot of activity here. And after the Christmas one, several of the players actually helped deliver those as well, which again you might have seen on social media. The last collection, over 500 kilograms of food was collected, over £1,400 was raised as well, which was a real success, makes a real difference, and the food equated to over 1,000 meals for needy families. We'd just like to say a thank you to Forest fan Jits Jarni, who also helped with this, arranging collections at the Trent Navigation alongside the stadium collection. So that really made a massive difference to the success of these campaigns. And these activities led for us to be entered into an award, FSA Awards, last year, Lockdown Heroes, and we won the trophy, which you can see there on the slide. So that was great to win that and have some of the things that we've done marked over the last year or 2. So that's the community update. Moving on to My City, My Shirt. So this was an initiative led by Barry Frenchman, who is one of the board members, but he's not able to be here tonight to talk about it, so I'm going to do so in his place. He led this campaign on behalf of the trust, and you may have seen it actually. It started to feature on some of the big screens before matches at the City Ground, and it was on the screens on Tuesday. And basically, this is a simple idea which promotes and celebrates diversity and inclusion in the Forest fan base, and it works by volunteer fans who had their photographs taken either at the City Ground or around the local Nottingham area at landmarks, and they represented all parts of the community. So that might be LGBT people from different ethnicities, or people with disabilities like Jack, who you can see on the screen now. And this campaign was done in partnership with Fans for Diversity, which is an FSA Kick It Out project, and also in partnership with Forest, who provided the shirt, so a new home shirt for every volunteer. And I believe we're the second club to do this. The first was Cardiff, but this time I think the fan engagement was a lot bigger, and also the club involvement was a lot better, obviously with the shirts, but also the photographer was the Forest official photographer, Richie Sumter. So a huge thanks to everybody who volunteered for that, and the social media engagement was really unprecedented. I think that the rationale behind it was that football crowds are not the most diverse, so this campaign shows that Forest is open to all. And Ed, who is running this meeting for us, has kindly put together a video which just wraps up some of the achievements and shares some of the photographs from both the campaign and also the launch, which took place at the council house, and Forest were represented at that by Nicholas Randall, John McGovern and Colin Barrett. So I'll just ask Ed now to show the video.
to ask Lindsay Knott, please, to talk about our disability update, please, Lindsay. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Evening, everybody. Just like to say that what I'm going to say links into a lot of what we've already said, and hopefully we'll be hearing further on in the meeting. 4 years ago, my disability started to impact on my ability to attend the city ground. And so working with other members of the trust, we wanted to look into the experience of fans with disabilities and the carers and companions. We did a consultation workshop in January 2020 held in the Robin Hood Suite. As with everything the trust has done, we've had the full support of the club in everything we've done. We've particularly been working with Scott Paul, who is actually the disability liaison officer at the club. We did a consultation workshop which highlighted a number of issues, including ticketing, disabled access, transport and parking. All the time we've been working together to look at the positives, but also to look at ways in which the match day experience can be improved for us fans with disabilities. We've met regularly with the club, and we presented our report of the consultation to Scott Paul, and on behalf of the club it was agreed that we would look to do some more consultation and bring disabled fans and their carers together by January 2022. We've been doing ongoing work also to find out what fans want, working with Level Playing Field, Andy mentioned right at the beginning, which is a national organisation that supports clubs and fans groups to reach out and engage disabled fans. They did a survey that included the feedback from Forest fans. We were able to receive that anonymously. We linked in with disabled fans at My City, My Shirt, which again shows how our projects can link together. And we've also still received direct communication from fans with disabilities. But what we're keen is, as Andy said at the beginning, we are just a few voices and for disabled fans to speak for and with themselves. Recently, I've met with the Supporters Community Trust with Graham Moran, and then with Claire Henson, who's the new, and I'm sure Graham will say more, Wellbeing and Inclusion Officer. And we're hoping to continue working with them. We've also, through myself, been attending events across the country of disabled supporters associations. Sadly, Forest at the moment is one of the few clubs that doesn't have one, but we're working to move towards that. Linking in with national forums for disabled fans and bringing that information back to the Supporters Trust, but also sharing it with the club. For example, we will all have witnessed the horrific experience of disabled fans at Wembley, the impact of COVID on disabled fans, and also making sure that disabled fans have a say in the fans-led review. I've also met with disabled fans at Fulham who have actively played a role in consultation around their new stand development, again learning from them and from other clubs such as Swansea. Last Monday, the Monday just gone, myself and the Supporters Trust, Scott Paul from the club and Liam Bird from Level Playing Field, who is actually a Forest fan, but he doesn't let his favouritism get in the way, actually held a disabled fans forum. A Zoom, we had hoped to have it at the club, but obviously with current restrictions, we moved it to Zoom. We were absolutely delighted that we had 40 people register an interest in the forum and 26 people attended. People with a wide variety of disabilities and also carers and organisations we've also kept in contact with, like Autism East Midlands. Claire came from the Community Trust as well, which was great. We've talked about issues that were still of concern, and Scott answered individual issues, as well as us building up more of a picture of some of the things we need to look at going forward. The brilliant thing to end on from that is 15 people have already put their names forward to join a steering group to work towards creating a disabled supporters association for the club, which has the full support not just of Scott, but also of Nick Randall, and his personal support has been great. So it's just another example how the Supporters Trust can be, in this case, a catalyst to get things going, but also in everything we do, we work with the club, we work with local organisations and we work with national organisations, and also we do it on behalf and for and empowering to be involved our members, but also the wider fan base and the wider community. So that's just where we're up to. So watch this space. We've got our next meeting in February. So hopefully by the end of this year, we'll also have a newly founded Nottingham Forest Disabled Supporters Association, thanks to the work instigated by the Trust.
Now we have somebody a little more impressive than me, the deeply impressive Graham Moran, who's an inspirational character. I don't know how well many of you know him, but what you're about to hear is going to be well worth listening to. Graham, thanks for your flexibility in joining a little early. Sorry we're a few minutes late in getting to you.
No problem.
Fire away. Let's hear what you've got to say. It'll be well worth listening to.
The purpose is tonight, so I really appreciate being invited into this to speak to you guys, and I thought it might be, in this instance, worth just giving a bit of background to myself and what we do at the Trust, but also a background leading up to where we've got to at the moment. And at some point in the future, we'd like to sort of formally present our new strategy and some of our ambition to the Supporters Trust, and we can organise that at a separate date. So I'll try not to keep you too long. Sometimes I do blab on a bit, so if I'm going, you can just cut me off if you want, or mute me. It's up to you. So my background is I'm a Forest fan. My dad was a hardcore Forest fan, and he forced me to be the same. So by luck, really, I was introduced to someone in Notts County who allowed me to go on this government training scheme. Like I say, I started there in 1992 and quite enjoyed it. The money wasn't great, but the work was fantastic. I realised it's probably cut out for that. I came to Forest in 2008, and we spent a couple of years setting up the chat, which is now Nottingham Forest Community Trust. The trust itself is governed separately from the club, so under Charity Commission guidelines and rules. We have an independent board, and on that board we have a number of people, including Nick Randall, who represents the club on my board. So he's my link into the club, and also in terms of our financial operation, which again is completely separate from the club. At the moment, I have John Taylor, who's almost the head of finance at Forest at the moment, and he sits on my finance committee. So we have a really good relationship with the club in terms of how we operate and the transparency that we try to give to make sure that everybody's aware of what we're doing and how we're operating. And each year, nationally, the trust is assessed what's called Capability Code of Practice, which is a sort of a professional football industry standards body, and we're assessed every year to make sure that we're complying with all the technical governance things around charitable trusts, and also to make sure that the relationship with the club is improving year on year. And I've said to Andy and one or two other people on the call that at the moment, in 30 years of being involved in community work within professional football, the relationship I have and the trust has with its owner and a board and a football club in general, including the Supporters Trust, I have to say, is the best I've known. And I would hold this relationship as a beacon to anywhere in the country, and I know pretty much everyone that runs a community trust in professional football. Just to bring you up to date, in 2020, we probably employ about 35 people that specifically work within the community trust, delivering our programs, and our revenue had grown to about £1.2 million a couple of years ago. And then when the pandemic hit, bear in mind, a lot of our work is face-to-face, working in schools, working with kids, coaching in the evenings, doing all sorts of face-to-face stuff. We thought it was going to cause us real problems, because then a lot of our funding that we were applying for, if we're not spending it, then funding can be reclaimed. But interestingly enough, through some of the work that we do and some of the relationships we have with local authority, the police, we managed to stay out on the street quite a bit, delivering some of our programs, even during lockdown, with some special permission from the Chief Constable, and delivering a lot of virtual activity in schools. And then also we were recipient of a big donation from Barclays, who were looking at what charities were doing across the country and wanted to help and support them. And they looked at what we'd done, what the club had done around food banks, and supporting people with household items during the pandemic. And they offered us £100,000 as a donation, probably the biggest donation we've had. And then through changing the way we work and some of the programs we deliver, actually that year was one of our most successful, interestingly enough, both financially and operationally. We've always kept very good, strong reserves in the bank. So my task from my board is to keep 6 months full operational costs in the bank, so that if we come across any issues or any major disasters, although we weren't expecting the pandemic, obviously, we can still operate because we're a charity and we're delivering lots of social programs. So for us, it would be an absolute nightmare if we weren't able to operate. So financially it worked for us, operationally it was good. We had quite a strong structure within the trust, a departmental structure that we pretty much scrapped for 18 months because we found ourselves in a position where a lot of our normal programs we couldn't deliver, and we just decided as a charity that our aim is really to help those in the greatest need. And we did everything that we could alongside the club, including players and stuff and things that you guys are doing, just to get stuck in and do that work. And actually it's created lots of new relationships for us and new programs that have come out of that now will help us over the next 2 or 3 years. And then in 2021, building on that, was our most successful ever year as a trust. So in terms of the impact we made, I think we made more impact in one single year last year than we have in other previous years. But also our revenue went over £2 million for the first time. And whilst the money's not everything, what it allows us to do, and because of the reserves that we keep, we can focus on what we need to do in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, and wherever we need to create specific programs that come under the Nottingham Forest banner. So in terms of organisation at the moment, we're quite strong, and but we're aware that things can change. But in terms of where we are as a trust, and certainly with the alignment we have with the club, which I've already said is the best I've ever known anywhere, things are happening now that aren't all dependent on money. It's dependent on collaboration and having values, I think, that we all want to aspire to. And that's where I see it at the moment in terms of the club. In terms of going forward, we are in the process now of restructuring completely, with the whole trust will be reset shortly, and we'll start again almost in terms of having that more formal structure. And also we'll be launching, if that's the right word for it, a new 3 to 5 year strategic plan that we've been working on for the last 18 months and done a lot of external consultation. We've had external people come in to look at what we do, look at the data and the insight across the city and the county, to identify where the biggest priorities are in terms of community engagement. And also, and I'll give you one example, is we came across an issue a couple of years ago where schools football, competitive schools football, was in danger of disappearing off the face of the earth because of lack of investment. And also it was operated by ex-teachers who have been doing it for 40, 50 years. So the Nottingham Schools Football Association committee is made up predominantly of 80-year-old plus teachers who are, every year we lose 2 or 3 through natural causes. So, and again, agreed with the club and the academy that for us to take that on as a trust, we're going to reinvigorate competitive football in schools and recreational football, and also reintroduce representative football. So Nottingham has representative school teams that can take part in national competitions. And again, the club have been great and supported us with investment into that. And that will just be one example of something that we think is really important to the city. I mean, schools football has been operating formally for 130 years now in Nottingham. And as a football club, again, talking about responsibility of a professional club, we can't, it would be a scandal if that was allowed to stop. So so that's just one example of something. And then we're setting at some targets now to have significant growth in impact. So we tend to judge our performance on the impact we're making, the difference we can make. And then also there's a financial side. So we want to be, the trust wants to be sustainable for the next 10 years and not driven by chasing funding because we're desperate for money. So we're getting into that sort of stage now where we're pretty much in control of our own destiny. And we're supported nationally by the Premier League, who invest significant sums of money into our trust, even though we're not in the Premier League. And if we do get in the Premier League, then that investment will increase from the Premier League into the trust itself. So that's quite positive for the future. In terms of our priorities going forward, we will consult with you guys fairly soon. So we're trying to take our time with this to make sure we get it absolutely right, because we want to take a long-term view. So we will be consulting with fans. In general terms, the big three things we'll be looking at and investing in the next 3 years are around training, education, and employment, particularly young people. When you look at the data around youth unemployment at the moment, it's quite scary, and we're trying to do something about that. Physical and mental well-being. Paul spoke eloquently earlier around the Tricky to Talk programme, and that started off focused on Forest fans, on families that had lost sons to suicide. And we started very small scale, and that's starting to increase now. And we're now in a position where we've invested the last 2 years quite heavily in terms of finance, but also now we've employed Claire Henson full-time, who's she's lived experience of anxiety. So it doesn't have to be about us delivering. We're sort of bringing people in who've got that knowledge and experience and skill. And then also generally around community engagement. And this fits with Mr. Marinakis. If you look at what Olympiakos do in Greece, it's a different model to what we've got here, but they're absolutely about family and helping local people. So, and there's some great examples that you can look on Olympiakos website of where they've gone out and helped refugees when other people are trying to push them back into the sea. They're trying to bring them in. So we know from his philosophy around philanthropy, it's really important. What's coming, we're now looking at some quite big programs and commissioned work that we're looking to deliver over the next few years. So one would be what's called holiday activity food. So it's providing food, excuse me, and lots of healthy activity for kids in the city that are eligible for free school meals, or anybody that may be an asylum seeker or a refugee, or anybody that needs help pretty much. And that's last year, that contract, or this year, we've just tendered for the contract now to become the lead partner with a local authority. And that's, just under £1 million commission piece of work. So again, that's really important that if we're not just bidding for funding, being commissioned because of how we deliver and what we do, and also people understand the importance of the club and the brand. You may have seen a lot of stuff on social media in the press around the relationship with a company called IdeaGen. So they're a massive employer in Nottingham. They're in the tech industry. They sponsor the academy, but they're also invested around about £600,000 over the next 5 years into apprenticeships that links into what we're doing as a trust, trying to get young people into the tech industry. And then the other big thing is facilities, football facilities in areas of deprivation in the city. So we already have on the Goose Fair site the Forest Recreation Ground. So that was originally £2 million worth of investment that we managed to bring from our football partners and the local authority. And we've now secured another £2 million to increase that to 2 full-size 3G pitches, floodlit. And when that phase is done in the next 18 months, it will be a big wraparound Nottingham Forest community stadium almost. So we're looking forward to that. And then we're also working with the Premier League and the Football Foundation, who are a facility funder. They work with government to create 5 or 6 of those forest recreation ground operations around the city. So almost every area of the city has one of these facilities that local people can access. And so that's quite exciting. And then my last one is, just to try and end on a high note, but this is probably a pipe dream, is we're looking to see if we could get a floodlit rooftop 3G pitch in the city centre that you could see for miles around. And that's probably, I might be dead by the time that happens, but we're on a march to do that. So like I said, it'd be really interesting once we get a bit further down the road with our sort of launching a formal strategy, a bit of consultation with fans, but also to present it to you formally, so you can you get a proper understanding of what we're trying to do, and it's still there to be shaped a little bit, but it's definitely focused on Nottinghamshire, and where the biggest priorities are. So what we're doing is aligning ourselves with what local authority are doing. And you know, you've only got to look at what's happening in Nottingham at the moment, that local authorities are struggling big time in terms of budgets. So there's a role for us as the third sector, as a charity, as there is for the private sector, to actually transform Nottingham and do lots of exciting stuff even through these difficult times.
Now I'm going to ask royalty from from the FSA to speak. Dave, if you wouldn't mind, feel free to address the audience for a while on whatever subject you wish.
Thanks, Andy. Never been referred to as royalty before, not even sir, but there you go. Yeah, thanks very much for asking me to come along. I mean, I'll allay anyone's fears straight away that I'm not here to talk extensively. I was really here to listen and maybe support and answer any questions around any FSA matters, around fan-led review, which has been talked about earlier on in the meeting. So thanks for letting us come along. I probably should say I'm a Sunderland fan, just get that out of the way. Obviously, nice connection with Cloughie there. I would like to think we moulded and forged them for you and then passed them down south to you guys, and you took all the glory. It's still a subject of disgruntlement, and you hear some of the older guys in the corner of pubs and before the matches in Sunderland. He's always the one that got away in terms of a manager for us. Our loss was certainly your gain. So yeah, I'm the deputy CEO of the Football Supporters Association. We've had a few mentions, which is really great to hear. And Bob covered the fan-led review stuff and some other things that you guys have been inputting to and helping us with and supporting the organisation with. He's covered that really well, but I'll touch on a couple of those things in a little bit. At the FSA, we're always talking about, whether it's in the media or when we're pushing various campaigns, how football supporters are the lifeblood of the game, and that a football club is like no other business. It's the heart of the community. And you guys couldn't have underlined that more tonight, I think, with all of the work that you've covered, from Lindsay on the disability stuff earlier on there, from the My City, My Shirt stuff, celebrating diversity, to helping out with food bank collections and all of that stuff that you've done with the foundation or trust Graham was talking about earlier. That just underlines like the importance of fans, and it's great that you seem to have an owner at the moment and a club set up that are working closely with you on that, and long may that continue. Really, really good to hear. And that sort of brings on to something else that I picked up on earlier in the meeting as well, which was there was a little bit of discussion about that membership had flatlined a little bit, and it even maybe had reduced, and some of that was maybe technical and some of it was maybe just where the club is at the moment. What I would say is that a lot of supporter groups that I come across punch above the weight anywhere, and you guys are definitely doing that with the work that you've undertaken. It's really, really great to hear. But I wouldn't beat yourself up about that membership issue. That's common. It's particularly common when things are going well. So a lot of supporter groups are actually born out of necessity and born of frustration. That tends to be how this works. It's a club in crisis that will ignite and be the catalyst for a supporter group even to begin to exist, let alone to flourish. And obviously everyone wants the best for the club and they don't want to be in crisis, but that does tend to be the real motivator for things like trusts. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. And actually, I'd like to stay in touch with you guys, which we will do anyway as an organisation, but there's a few things we can talk about with the FSA, some little bits of guidance about how maybe you can continue to recruit, and sort of little tricks of the trade that we've learned in terms of engaging membership in peacetime, so to speak. So we can cover that sort of in another session, I suppose. But yeah, I just wanted to make that point. Don't beat yourselves up about that. It's normal. It's what happens. You've got to keep doing what you're doing and looking at engaging, new members all the time through the work that you do, really. Another reason why supporters trusts and groups like yourselves exist is partly traditionally a trust in particular was seen to be the vehicle you needed to own some shares in the club or to own the club outright. That has, there's varying degrees of how how based in reality that is, depending on who's support, how big the club is and what the finances are like, how big your fan base is, all those things come into play. And for a lot of clubs, a lot of professional clubs, it's probably a little bit of a pipe dream that the fans would be able to do that, but nevertheless, it's something that we advocate. Because of that, sometimes a trust will need that extra support and help to be able to engage the fan base, because some might question, well, what's it for? Yes, I can say all of the community work, and that's brilliant, but why be a member? Why support it? And I think one of the big answers to that now, if ownership isn't on the cards, if there isn't a crisis or anything like that, I think in terms of engaging support to understand why a trust like yourselves is so important and something to be a part of, the fan-led review really comes into play now. And if everything, as Bob mentioned earlier, everything seems to be pointing towards a real positive outcome here. We've not come off the tracks yet in terms of the journey that we're on with it. Tracy Crouch spoke with Kevin Miles, the CEO, not that long ago, and continues to be very bullish and confident about the direction of travel, and that it's a case of when it will happen, not if. So we're pushing that along all the way, and you guys have been supporting that, and there'll be various campaigns over the next few months, some behind the scenes, some up front in the media, to keep pushing that along. So all the support you can give for that is great. The reason why it's so important to trust is that what we hope will happen, and again, I think this was something in Bob's presentation earlier, was the golden share being a particularly useful device, and something that will be gifted to functioning trusts, and that's massively important. It's the type of stuff that any fan really, if they're not a fan that's interested generally in governance of the game, but what they will be interested in is their identity of their club, the colours you play in, where you play, the badge, all these heritage issues really that are close to the heart and really emotive issues. That's the sort of thing that the golden share will take control of and allow fans to have that say. Andy, you mentioned at the start, like, owners come and go, chairmen come and go, boards come and go, but the fans are the one constant. So why shouldn't they be the guardians of what their club looks like and feels like and the direction that they're going in? So the fan-led review should address lots of that. And of course, there'll be the setting up of a shadow board as well. The trust will play a major part in helping to appoint that. Just one other thing I picked up on as well when we were talking about sort of traction for a trust amongst the fan base. And I know that you guys pull in co-opted reps now and again to act on particular campaigns and to help you out. I would massively encourage that. That's something that I've personally seen work really well. I'm outside of my day job, I volunteer with the Red and White Army Supporters Trust at Sunderland, a trust that it was only launched last year actually. And I think at the last count there's 18 co-opted reps there that dip in and out. And it's a great way of engaging younger fans as well. It's a great way of engaging fans from different backgrounds and different aspects of the support. And it's also a gateway to an interest on getting on the board as well with the trust. So it keeps that interest going and it keeps a churn there as well. So so it's great to see that you're already doing bits and bobs around that, and I would definitely encourage that. So there is a history of some excellent supporter ownership, which has then been undone, and sometimes that is at the will of the supporters, of course. So Portsmouth being a relatively recent example of that. I mean, they pulled the club up from the ashes and then agreed to sell later, and that's because the ambition of football and the perceived size of a club and all the investment needed and all those things come into play, of course. I think what the fan-led review will do will still hold, certainly the FSA will always hold supporter ownership up as an aspirational thing that we would want to be able to happen where possible, but we're not evangelists for it. It's one kind of ownership, and you don't even have to look at the pyramid now to see that it's a minority in terms of clubs that are owned by the fans, but there's some extremely well-run ones. And I think what the fan-led review will do will mean that there is a structure in place that for all of the reality of the world is it's difficult for fans to run clubs and to be able to compete like they might want to and what their fan base might want to. So with that in mind, the fan-led review will be able to assist all of those clubs outside of supporter ownership to have a huge influence from the fans. Not just influence, not just soft influence by voting with your feet or not buying pies or protesting or engagement that could be switched off like a light bulb if the owner wanted to. Engagement would be embedded. It'll be a rule. You will have to properly engage with your support to have a license to play in the league that you want to compete in. There will be a shadow board, and then from a control point of view, on top of that, the golden share as well. So we think that the fan-led review will, and obviously with an independent regulator oversee all that with teeth, we think that the fan-led review will box all of those things that supporters want control of, but might not be able to physically be able to afford to have a share in the club. That should matter less in terms of the influence of fans and the health of the game.
That's great. David, please, you've come because we've got another question for you from Laith Gibani. And that question is, does the Trust FSA have a position on the 50+1 rule and how it could be implemented in England? So I'm going to put that to you.
Yes, in terms of the preparation for our submission to the fan-led review, and much of which was adopted, almost all of it was adopted by the Crouch report. The model in Germany, which is often cited as the sort of bastion of ownership in the 50+1 rule, was something that was considered. We have an umbrella organisation of our own in terms of Football Supporters Europe, so we have good connections with fan groups over there. It isn't the utopia that is sometimes painted in Germany, and in fact, since we've entered into detailed discussion around this, we've had a number of German supporter groups and individuals looking at the golden share idea as a better alternative. So again, the 50+1 thing, there's a lot of merit in it, but it's how achievable is it given the realities of finances in football in England? How achievable would it be to raise those funds? When you've got all these legal entities set up as businesses, it's a difficult nut to crack, which is where I think the golden share is, and the shadow board and the structured engagement, which is mandatory and not voluntary. These things should tick the boxes that we want as fans without the need to have to purchase 51% of your club.
Thanks very much for that. I'm just looking, I can't see any other typed questions, can't see any hands raised. So if it's okay with everybody, I'm going to close the meeting, and I'm going to say thank you very much indeed to those of you amongst our membership who joined us tonight. I hope you've been interested by what you've heard. If you'd like to hear any more, if you'd rather do that privately, you know how to get in touch with us via our website or via social media. We're more than happy to talk to you at any point. We deeply appreciate your support. Organisations like this can't exist without members, and so it's greatly appreciated. The last point, we are all football fans, so I'm going to finish by saying, you Reds! Thanks and good night.